Hey guys, today I'll show you a supernatural horror mystery TV series named The Guest, Part 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Previously on Part 1, Yoon's father revealed to Choi that how he found Choi's brother hanged himself and rushed to save him but failed. And from the dying Sang, the father got to know that the master demon was never a living person to begin with. The next day, Choi relayed to them what Yoon's father had said. All the leads they had were suddenly cut off, and 20 years of effort seemed to reset to zero. Coupled with his father's attitude, Yoon was disheartened. To give Yoon time to recover, Choi and Gil set off for Yoon's hometown to look for new clues. But when the villagers heard the name of the master demon, they became panicked and were unwilling to say more. Only a kindly elder suggested they speak to a solitary old man in the village. In a surprising twist of fate, the old man turned out to be Yoon's grandfather. He was initially delighted to have visitors after a long time, but when he heard that they came looking for information about the master demon, he quickly shifted to drive them away. Choi then revealed a critical piece of information, that his brother Sang, the priest, had died while trying to exorcise the master demon from Yoon. On hearing this, the grandfather, filled with guilt, calmed down. He didn't have much information on the master demon, but he did share a story from his childhood. 60 years ago, on a dark night, a murderous figure appeared in the village. The villagers cornered the figure, who stabbed his own right eye and jumped into the eastern sea, but he never died. Instead, he floated on the surface, staring at the villagers. The grandfather gave them the few details he had and warned them to be careful. Meanwhile, Yoon's father returned to his workplace, wanting to confront his manager about why he was not being given any work. Out of frustration, the manager tripped him. He was about to further assault Yoon's father when Yoon, who had been quietly following, stepped in and pushed the manager away. Although Yoon had saved him, his father still appeared terrified. Yoon angrily told his father to wake up, reminding him that he had also seen the master demon transfer to Choi's brother. Unexpectedly, his father corrected him, stating that what had transferred to priest Sang was just a minion spirit, not the master demon. Before the priest died, he told Yoon's father that the master demon had always been in their house. Yoon was shocked by the revelation, and his father took the opportunity to slip away. The next day, Yoon rushed back to his hometown hoping to chat with his grandfather, only to find that he wasn't home. He asked the neighbor and learned that his grandfather often took the bus and wandered off to find people. This information shocked Yoon. He returned home and rummaged around, eventually finding many bus receipts in a box, confirming the neighbor's words. However, Yoon knew his grandfather had once said he couldn't stand the smell of gasoline and would get carsick, making it impossible for him to leave their hometown by bus. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was his father asking to meet. Yoon hurried to meet him, only to find his father had completely changed his attitude. His father kept apologizing, saying he had misunderstood Yoon. In disbelief, Yoon asked what had happened. The father told him he was sure that the master demon had now attached itself to his grandfather. Apparently, his grandfather had shown up at his father's house earlier and said too many things he shouldn't have. The grandfather's strange behavior had terrified his father, so he had scared him off with a knife. Now, he just wanted to apologize to Yoon and run away together. Just then, the landlord came knocking, saying someone was on the phone for his father. The father asked Yoon to wait, promising to move out as soon as he returned from the call. But as soon as the father picked up the phone, he was possessed by an evil spirit. He turned to go back to his room, and the poor landlord, oblivious to his transformation, kept shouting for him to pay the rent. This made the father pause. Inside the room, Yoon's psychic powers suddenly activated, and he saw a vision of the landlord being killed by a fire extinguisher. Suddenly, his phone rang, breaking his psychic connection. As he answered the call, he felt something from behind. Turning around, he saw his father swinging a fire extinguisher at him. Yoon dodged and looked at his father in disbelief. The father attacked again, and the two began to grapple. Now the possessed father not only stopped limping, but also had enormous strength. They fought from the room to the outside, and Yoon found himself being choked. It was a desperate situation. He couldn't fight back like he would against other evil spirits, but could only hope his father would come to his senses. Fortunately, a neighbor came out to watch and was spotted, causing his father to temporarily retreat and run away. Yoon rushed to check on the landlord, but this action led the other residents to believe that he was the perpetrator. Seeing his bloody hands and hearing the police sirens, Yoon had no choice but to flee. The police soon identified Yoon as the suspect. Only Gil knew the truth, but she couldn't explain it all. She asked her partner and the team leader to give her some time, promising that Yoon would come to the police station to explain. Gil left the scene and called Yoon, urging him to go to the police station to clarify the situation. But Yoon said his father was possessed, and he had to find him quickly, or his father would continue to kill and even end his life. Gil told him to go to the police station first, while she and Choi would help find his father, but Yoon hung up the phone. Not long after, Choi was finishing up at the church and preparing to go home. He was about to answer his phone when Yoon appeared beside him, asking him not to take Gil's call. Yoon told Choi everything that had happened and asked him to help find his father. After assessing the situation, Choi decided to help Yoon first. Thus, they went to the residence of the foreman who had bullied Yoon's father, with Yook's assistance to watch over his father's workplace. At the same time, the police found Yoon's fingerprints at the crime scene. However, Gil continued to defend Yoon, leading her partner to become impatient with her mysterious actions. Gil could only promise that when an opportunity presented itself, she would reveal everything. After saying this, she once again left to search for Yoon. At this moment, the two were discussing the course of events. Yoon mentioned that his father was possessed after identifying his grandfather as the Master Demon. He hoped that Choi could perform an exorcism on his father, giving them a chance to uncover the truth. Though Choi agreed, he was reminded of the curse the evil spirit had placed on him. If he performed another exorcism, his flesh and blood would rot, and he would die if he performed a third one. Suddenly, Yoon thought of another place his father might go, but did not want to tell Choi. He asked Choi to stay put and hurriedly left. It turned out that the place was his own home. As soon as he entered, he saw a dark shadow waiting for him. Yoon was startled, thinking his father had indeed appeared. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be his grandfather who had come to visit him alone. His grandfather cheerfully chatted with Yoon and even brought his favorite shrimp sauce. Facing Yoon's suspicions, his grandfather tried to explain everything. But the current Yoon was not in a state to listen and left in a huff. Just as Yoon left his home, he ran into Gil, but he fled, with Gil pursuing him. With the help of her partner, they apprehended Yoon and took him back to the police station. Inside the police station, Yoon avoided any mention of spirits while answering questions. However, this omission only made him appear more suspicious. Gil knew that they couldn't continue like this. She urged Yoon to cool down at the station, promising that she would help find his father. Gil then found Choi and told him about the startling information she had uncovered from the clues Yoon's grandfather had provided. It turned out that the Master Demon was based on a real person, a mad serial killer. Because of his family's influential status, the news was kept under wraps. His family thought he was mentally ill and sent him to the rehabilitation center run by Yoon's family in their hometown, but the man's condition didn't improve. Instead, he killed his wife and children as sacrifices and then stabbed out his right eye before disappearing into the sea. But years later, he somehow came back as the Master Demon. To Gil's shock, the person who had assisted the madman was Counselor Park's grandfather, indicating that she was indeed related to the Master Demon. Later, Gil returned to Yoon's father's place to gather more information. She noticed a panicked individual fleeing the scene and promptly gave chase, managing to apprehend him. Back at the police station, this man turned out to be a thief, but he had witnessed Yoon's father's actions on that day. From his testimony, it was revealed that Yoon's father had killed the landlord on his own, and Yoon had nothing to do with it. Gil immediately requested the leader to clear Yoon of suspicion. The next day, Yoon was exonerated and released, but they lost all leads to find Yoon's father. Suddenly, Yoon remembered that the person his father hated the most was him. Besides his residence, his father might go to his old home where he lived with Yoon's grandfather. At that moment, Yoon's grandfather had just returned to the old house and found a pair of worn-out shoes. Turning around, he discovered Yoon's father standing before him. The unsuspecting grandfather happily embraced Yoon's father, telling him it was good that he had returned. But Yoon's father had a cold expression on his face. Meanwhile, the trio were driving towards Yoon's old house. Yoon's psychic power suddenly activated, showing him a vision of his struggling grandfather. Seeing Yoon's condition, they sped up the car to reach the scene. However, they were too late, only to find Yoon's grandfather was severely injured, lying in a pool of blood. Gil called for an ambulance while the two desperately tried to stop the grandfather's bleeding wound. The grandfather opened his eyes, expressing his guilt to Yoon. Yoon tried to stop him from talking, but with the loss of too much blood, the grandfather fell unconscious. Gil started to perform first aid on the grandfather, while Yoon noticed his possessed father standing in the distance, holding a rope and staring at them. The two immediately gave chase, but the evil spirit's speed was incredibly fast. Choi gave up halfway due to exhaustion, while Yoon lost sight of his father at a bend. But just then, the possessed father silently appeared behind him, strangling him with the rope, causing Yoon to nearly pass out. Just then, Yoon pulled out his mother's wedding ring from his pocket and dropped it on the ground. Seeing the ring, the father suddenly stopped and came to his senses. He didn't remember what had happened. He then noticed a cloud of black smoke rushing towards him from behind Yoon. The evil spirit once again took control of the father's body. Struggling against the evil spirit, the father urged Yoon to leave and apologize to him. Then he ran off in agony. Yoon chased after him, but when he reached a bridge, he saw his father with the rope around his neck, ready to jump into the river. The evil spirit, in a terrifying voice, told Yoon that everyone around him would be lost. His parents, Gil and Choi, would all die. After saying this, the evil spirit stabbed itself in the right eye and jumped off the bridge right in front of Yoon. Choi arrived at the scene just then. Both of them tried to save Yoon's father, but they were too far away. They could only watch as Yoon's father stopped struggling and lost his breath. The grandfather, due to excessive blood loss, was rushed to the hospital. Yoon visited him, clutching his father's portrait and feeling utterly lost. Soon after, the group accompanied Yoon to the crematorium. After Yoon had collected his father's ashes, he remembered the words of the evil spirit. Everyone close to him would die one by one. So Yoon made a silent decision. He asked Gil and Choi to meet him outside the crematorium. He earnestly told them that he had given up on finding the master demon, and hence would no longer be in contact with them. He urged them to move on and live their lives. Having said that, he turned away with Yuk. Despite knowing that Yoon was deeply hurt, they didn't take his words to heart. Gil proposed that she would keep an eye on Counselor Park, hoping to find new clues from her. After Gil left, Father Yang appeared behind Choi. Over a meal, Choi shared with Father Yang the recent events. Unexpectedly, Father Yang suggested that the only possibility was that the master demon was still inside Yoon's body. Choi found it hard to believe. After all, Yoon was a companion he had trusted through life and death. However, Father Yang argued that the master demon was the most potent ghost, and might have possessed Yoon without him realizing it. This explained why Yoon could see the actions of the evil spirits. This theory reminded Choi of what the possessed person had told him, that Yoon was just like them. At this moment, doubt began to creep into Choi's heart. Just as Yoon was about to leave the hospital, he felt a chilling sensation behind him. A dark aura was rushing towards him. Yoon's right eye burst into pain, and blood splattered everywhere. The master demon appeared in front of him. Yoon screamed, trying to seize him, but the intense pain dragged him back to reality. All that had just occurred was just a hallucination. After leaving the hospital, Yoon and Yuk had drinks together. Yuk was glad that Yoon had let go of his hatred and was no longer pursuing the master demon. But Yoon confessed that he had only said that for Gil and Choi to hear. He vowed to catch the master demon and tear it apart, but he didn't want to involve Choi and Gil anymore. At the same time, Gil and Choi were discussing their next plan. After hearing what Father Yang had said, Choi decided to return to Yoon's hometown and seek information from a mysterious person. Gil wanted to start with Counselor Park, but hadn't yet found a way. Her partner returned to the police station. He was frustrated at an unsolved case. Hearing this, Gil sought advice from her partner and wanted to help him with the case. Under the pretext of an investigation, Gil met with Counselor Park. She revealed that they knew the master demon was Counselor Park's relative. She also deliberately mentioned that she knew who the master demon was possessing now. Counselor Park was shocked, and Gil confidently walked away. Her concise words had triggered Counselor Park's anxiety disorder. At the same time, Choi arrived at a mental hospital. He was looking for a mysterious person, a spirit medium who had helped Yoon perform an exorcism many years ago. However, she had been severely injured and driven insane by an evil spirit. The spirit medium told Choi that although they had managed to suppress the powerful demon in the day, the ritual had not been successful. As such, the seal on Yoon's body was rapidly fading. The demon had also warned her that it would never give up on possessing Yoon's body. As she shared this, the spirit medium suddenly turned to Choi with a strange smile, saying that he too was cursed by the evil spirit. She warned that the spirit would continue to kill, and many people would die. As her psychosis flared up again, Choi had no choice but to end the visit. Meanwhile, as Yoon returned home, his right eye suddenly throbbed with intense pain. As he calmed down, he saw the ghost of his father. Despite his surprise, it seemed like he wanted Yoon to follow him. Thus, Yoon followed his steps to a public phone booth. After demonstrating how to answer the phone, the ghost vanished into thin air. Back home, Yoon was still pondering these strange events when Yuk suddenly visited. Yoon shared everything with Yuk, who understood that the seal on Yoon's body had been broken. The pain in his right eye and the ability to see ghosts indicated that Yoon's spiritual powers were returning. Yoon had realized the significance of his father leading him to the phone. The last thing his father did before being possessed by the evil spirit was to answer a phone call. Hence, he asked Yuk to find out who had made that call through his connections. This could lead them to the whereabouts of the master demon. The scene shifts back to Gil, whose plan had worked. As expected, Counselor Park couldn't hold back and quickly left her office with her driver. Gil followed her to a remote location where Counselor Park got out of her car and walked some distance to an eerie tunnel. Gil maintained some distance and slowly approached. However, the next sight left Gil in utter shock. The person meeting Counselor Park was Father Yang, someone Choi trusted deeply. The next day, Counselor Park invited the police chief and the squad leader for a meal. Counselor Park didn't mince words, informing the squad leader about Gil meddling in her affairs. She showed her true colors, cursing and smashing glasses. Soon after, Gil was summoned by her senior partner, who said that her actions had put the entire police station under Counselor Park's scrutiny. Despite being her senior, he was clueless about what Gil was up to. Knowing she had caused trouble for everyone, Gil reluctantly shared the story about the master demon. As expected, her partner couldn't believe her smelly bullshit and thought Gil was joking, urging her to come to her senses. Gil could only ask him to keep his distance from her before leaving. Later, Gil met with Choi to exchange information. Choi shared that his intel pointed towards the master demon still being inside Yoon. Upon hearing this, Gil expressed her suspicion towards Father Yang rather than Yoon. She told Choi about the tunnel and advised him to be cautious of Father Yang. After separating, Gil returned home to find someone lurking outside her front door. When they crossed paths, she grabbed the person and recognized him as Counselor Park's driver. Unexpectedly, the driver pulled out a knife, resisted, and ran away. At that moment, her partner arrived, intending to reconcile with Gil. Seeing the fleeing man in black and Gil, he helped to catch the man, tackling the driver to the ground. However, he didn't realize the driver had a knife, and he cried out in pain as he fell to the ground. Gil rushed over, saw her partner was injured, and abandoned the pursuit of the driver, rushing him to the hospital instead. The next day, Yoon received the phone number Yuk had found for him, but when he dialed it, he was shocked that the person on the other end was Father Yang at his church. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Gil's partner was out of danger after surgery. After getting his wife and colleague to leave, he was about to rest when a mysterious visitor arrived. On the other hand, Gil, aiming to capture the driver who stabbed her partner, was staking out Counselor Park's office. When she saw Counselor Park's car and the driver, she moved to arrest him. However, she was disappointed to find that the driver had been replaced and the new driver knew nothing about his predecessor. Gil could only leave disappointed, but then she received a call. It was her injured partner asking to meet her. Gil arrived at the agreed location. The partner, with a beaming smile, was in his car and told Gil he would take her to meet someone. This person would provide information about the master demon. Gil was surprised because her partner had clearly not believed her before. Although she felt something was off, Gil decided to get in the car. The pair had not been on the road for long when the partner began to act strangely. He alternated between displaying a creepy grin and accusing Gil of causing his injury, all while drinking large amounts of water. These unusual behaviors led Gil to realize that something was seriously wrong. Meanwhile, Yoon went to the church to confront Father Yang. He suspected Father Yang was the master demon, but Father Yang insisted that the master demon was possessing Yoon. As they argued back and forth with no resolution, Yoon noticed an inverted cross on the wall. But Father Yang claimed it was merely due to a loose nail. Yoon was about to straighten it when his right eye began throbbing with pain again. To avoid raising further suspicions, he pretended nothing was wrong and hastily left. Outside the church, Yoon ran into Choi, who wanted Yoon to cover his left eye to prove he wasn't possessed. But Yoon was still upset and engaged in a heated debate with Choi, saying that he suspected Father Yang. But Choi insisted that couldn't be the case, as Father Yang was an exorcist. Yoon countered that his brother Sang was also an exorcist, but he still got possessed. Finally, Yoon covered his left eye and claimed that he could see him clearly now. Just as Yoon turned to leave, his psychic ability suddenly activated, revealing Gil's face and the voice of her partner. Startled, Yoon immediately called Gil. Gil had just picked up the phone when her partner knew it was Yoon calling. This confirmed Gil's suspicion. The partner by her side was possessed by a demon. Knowing she needed help, Gil quickly shouted out her location. However, the partner abruptly swerved the car into the roadside. Hearing the crash, Yoon jumped into his car, told Choi that Gil was in danger, and the two rushed to the rescue. Inside the wrecked car, Gil was seriously injured, bleeding from a head wound. She struggled to get up, but her partner was already gone. Looking in the rearview mirror, Gil saw him coming at her with a knife. Although Gil was a formidable fighter, the possessed partner showed no signs of letting her go. He chased after her, laughing creepily and brandishing his knife. Gil managed to escape into an old room in an abandoned building and locked the partner outside. Suddenly, the partner's tone switched between pleading and threatening. One moment he complained about his painful injury and wanted to go home. The next he was threatening to cut off Gil's neck. Suddenly, the noise outside the door stopped. As Gil listened closely, she realized the partner had climbed through the broken wall into the room. It was too late for Gil to escape, and the two locked in muscle wrestling again. The injured Gil was no match for her possessed partner. He grabbed her by the head and slammed her into the wall, leaving her defenseless. He then grabbed her leg and threw her out of the building like an adult toy. Hanging onto a construction rope for dear life, Gil was left dangling from the side of the building. The demon, seemingly pleased with her struggle, was about to deliver the final blow when Yoon and Choi arrived. Deciding to deal with them first, he left Gil to her fate. The two ascended the stairs and encountered the possessed officer. They decided to split up, one to rescue and the other to stall the evil spirit. Yoon arrived in the room to find Gil hanging off. He reached out and grabbed her, but soon realized he didn't have the strength to pull her up, possibly because she was too heavy. As Gil slowly lost consciousness, Yoon remembered how he lost his father in a similar manner. He didn't want to lose another loved one, so he summoned all his strength and managed to pull Gil up. He then carried her heavy body back to the car and contacted Choi. Choi informed him that the partner had escaped. However, the partner unexpectedly doubled back and attacked Yoon. Just then, Yoon used a self-defense spray. Ever since Yoon's psychic powers started to recover, his intuition had been growing stronger. The partner painfully collapsed, and Yoon used handcuffs to restrain him, waiting for Choi to join them. The two then took the partner back to an abandoned building and tied him up, preparing to perform an exorcism. However, as a consequence of the previous episode's events, Choi was filled with doubt towards Yoon. The evil spirit exploited this, continuously provoking the two, causing Choi to be unable to focus on his prayers. Due to his lack of concentration, his prayers were constantly interrupted by the evil spirit, rendering them ineffective. Out of frustration, Choi took out holy water and drew a cross on the demon's forehead, delivering a powerful blow. The injured demon began to warn Choi about a curse it had placed on him. Choi quickly covered the demon's big mouth. Yoon was surprised to hear that and tried to ask for more details, but Choi angrily chased them out. Given the dire situation, Yoon had to leave the room with Gil. After settling Gil in a safe place, he prepared to go back and help Choi. Gil, feeling guilty, begged Yoon to save her partner. Yoon reassured her that everything would be fine. Meanwhile, Choi was praying hard in the room, but struck by the curse. He collapsed in pain and weakness, and the demon's powers were weakened, resulting in the officer's human body starting to bleed uncontrollably. Yoon returned to the room, and seeing the situation, started to panic. If this continued, not only would the exorcism fail, but the officer could die. Suddenly, Choi saw the spilled holy water on the floor and had an idea. He asked Yoon to help him find a water source to create a large amount of holy water. Yoon quickly found the water valve and turned it on, while Choi found a bathtub to collect the water. After obtaining the water, Choi started reciting the prayer to purify the holy tap water and placed his cross inside. The cross emitted a glow, successfully purifying a tub of holy water. Yoon went back to check on the officer. Unexpectedly, the demon, sensing danger, tried to snap the officer's neck to terminate himself. Gil called out to her partner, reminding him of the good times in the past and not to submit to the demon. Hearing Gil's call, the partner shed tears of blood. Yoon tried to stop him from breaking his neck and shouted for Choi to hurry up. The trio then threw him into the bathtub. The unconscious demon was awakened by the holy water and started to thrash around in pain. Yoon and Gil held it down, and with the help of the large amount of holy water, the demon quickly weakened. Despite its terrible screams, Choi remained unfazed and completed his prayer, causing the demon to vomit a large amount of seawater and disappear. With the demon gone, the officer regained his senses. He asked whether Gil was all right, causing Gil to break down in tears of guilt. And so, the partner was taken back to the hospital for treatment. However, he had completely lost memory of the events that transpired last night. Choi also discovered that he had sustained many terrifying wounds on his body. Hallucinations appeared before his eyes again, with demons laughing at him in the mirror. But Choi refused to admit defeat and shattered the mirror with a punch. In the evening, Choi sought out Yuk. He voiced his suspicion that Yoon was the master demon. Yuk vouched for Yoon's goodness and assured Choi that the master demon was definitely not within Yoon. Still, Choi remained unconvinced. He stated that Yoon's father had said that the master demon was still in Yoon's house, suggesting they might have been deceived. The two were at an impasse, and a frustrated Choi left to find Yoon. On the other hand, Choi was waiting for Yoon as soon as he returned home. Choi took out holy water from a box with intent to use it on Yoon. Yoon, feeling betrayed by a trusted companion, was not willing to cooperate. This led to a physical altercation between the two. Although Yoon was angry, he also feared injuring Choi, so he stopped resisting and let Choi perform the exorcism on him. Choi took out a cross and prayed. But apart from anger, Yoon showed no signs of being possessed, which further confused Choi. Yoon pushed Choi away and told him to wake up. Gil had seen the person who met Counselor Park, and Yoon had found out that it was Father Yang who had called Yoon's father. But Choi still couldn't believe it. After leaving Yoon's house, Choi thought back to his childhood when he lost his family and became an orphan, bullied by others. It was Father Yang who rescued and took care of him for many years. Therefore, he found it impossible to believe that Father Yang could be the master demon. To prove this misunderstanding, Choi went to the church at night to talk to Father Yang, but he was too late. Father Yang had left the church long ago, so Choi wandered around Father Yang's office. But to his shock, he picked up a Bible and flipped through it, only to find that every page had been blacked out. This was something only a devotee of Satan would do. Choi was so shocked and heartbroken that he trembled and couldn't accept the reality. At the same time, Yuk, spurred on by Choi's words, traveled to the backyard of Yoon's old home to perform a spirit summoning ceremony, hoping to prove that Yoon had not been possessed by the master demon. Just then, his spiritual powers activated. Yuk lost control and began digging into the ground frantically, where he unearthed shocking evidence from a pile of dirt. However, Yuk was suddenly assaulted by an invisible force, lifted into the air and hurled around. He was severely injured and started vomiting blood. With the last bit of his power, he retaliated and fled in panic. At that moment, Yoon happened to call Yuk. Yuk, escaping into the car, picked up the call and nervously said that he knew who the master demon was. But Yuk was once again choked, unable to speak. He had to hang up the phone and drive away, bearing the pain. Yoon sensed something was wrong and hastily set out to find Yuk. Yuk, although struggling all the way, was unable to breathe. He painfully stopped the car and stepped out. Vomiting blood, he shouted at the demon to kill him only but spared Yoon. Just like that, Yuk stopped breathing and fell into the field. Meanwhile, Choi had discovered the blackened Bible in Father Yang's room. The next day happened to be Mass at the church. Choi quietly attended the ceremony conducted by Father Yang. During the process, Choi noticed that not only had Father Yang altered the prayer text, but he also hadn't genuinely consumed the sacraments. Even the wine for Holy Communion had been replaced with water. Distressed, he walked onto the stage in front of all the believers, poured out the water from the holy cup, and questioned why Father Yang was faking the ritual. Father Yang remained silent with cold eyes. Security was called to remove Choi, who in his anguish cried out that he couldn't believe he was the real master demon. Subsequently, Choi was brought before the elders. They wanted to know why he had disrupted Mass. Choi presented the blackened Bible to the elders, claiming Father Yang had been possessed by the master demon. The elders were very surprised, but Father Yang told everyone that Choi had mental issues, that all of this was his imagination, and he had blackened the Bible himself. Choi, seeing himself being framed, angrily took out a cross and approached Father Yang to perform an exorcism. As soon as Choi started praying, Father Yang reacted, but he maintained his composure, not letting others notice. The elders stepped in to stop Choi, who tried to continue praying. But when Father Yang glared at him, the curse on Choi instantly took effect, causing him to collapse in pain. The scene shifts to Gil's side. She went to the gathering of the Sharing Hand organization to find Father Yang, but unexpectedly saw that Counselor Park was being awarded. Gil thought it was particularly ironic. Counselor Park also noticed Gil and deliberately came over to intimidate her, warning Gil to keep her smelly mouth shut. Suddenly, a woman rushed into the room, shouting that Counselor Park was a devil and that she needed to step down. Counselor Park was immediately escorted away by her bodyguards, and Gil took this good opportunity to gather information. This woman was called Min. She took Gil back to her residence and took out a tape recorder, stating that because she always had a habit of recording, she accidentally obtained significant evidence of Counselor Park misappropriating public funds. However, because she was afraid it would implicate others, she had been hesitant to report Counselor Park. Gil asked a lot about Counselor Park and Father Yang, and Min realized that Gil was serious about dealing with Counselor Park. At the moment, Park received a report from her men that Gil had gone to Min's house. She felt that something was wrong, so she contacted Father Yang to ask for advice on how to handle the situation. Father Yang, who was packing up his belongings and preparing to leave the church, told Counselor Park to resolve the matter peacefully and not to hurt anyone. Park was unhappy, but this was Father Yang's instruction, and she could only comply. The scene then moves to Yoon's side. Because of Yuk's call, he rushed back to his hometown, but saw Yuk waving at him on the road. However, as soon as Yoon approached, Yuk suddenly disappeared and appeared in another place. Yoon had a bad feeling. He ran towards Yuk again, but Yuk disappeared as before. When he reappeared, he pointed to the nearby fields. Yoon slowly approached him, and his spiritual power allowed him to sense some of the events that had happened here. He knew that Yuk had died, so he sadly returned to his car, not knowing what to do. Gil called and asked Yoon to return to the city, saying that they found proof that Father Yang was the master demon. Afterward, the three met. Choi handed the blackened Bible to Yoon and described what had happened. After that, Yoon said that things were much simpler now. They just needed to catch Father Yang. Gil asked about Yuk, and Yoon told her what he had sensed. However, he did not understand why Yuk suddenly wanted to return to find clues. Choi guiltily said that it was because he doubted Yoon, so Yuk went to find evidence. In anger, Yoon threw a punch at Choi. Gil saw it and intervened. She said that Choi was also deceived by the evil spirit and did not mean to cause it. Yoon suppressed his emotions and went to the church to catch Father Yang, but Gil said it was too late. Father Yang had already resigned and disappeared. The following day, the church's judgment on Choi was announced. He was to be confined in a punishment cell and could not step outside without the church's permission. Meanwhile, back at the police station, Gil's partner told her that Min had been trying to reach her. Gil returned the call, and Min revealed that she had decided to report Counselor Park. Gil was thrilled and asked Min to bring her evidence and meet her at the police station. However, as Min was preparing to leave her house, Counselor Park arrived with a gift, trying to win her over with a lucrative offer. But Min was not swayed. She insulted Park, calling her a thief, and kicked her out. Park was filled with murderous rage, completely forgetting Father Yang's instructions. She picked up a trophy and hit Min on the head. Min struggled, bleeding heavily, but Park showed no mercy, beating her until she herself was covered in blood and screaming. Afterwards, she cooled down and realized her impulsiveness had caused a disaster. At this time, Father Yang was in Yoon's grandfather's hospital room, preparing to do something when his phone rang. It was Counselor Park asking him to come and help. This forced him to temporarily stop what he was doing. When Father Yang arrived at the scene, she bowed to him weakly. He was speechless at the sight of the chaos. He gave Counselor Park a hard slap, sending her flying like an adult toy. He then calmly told her to go home while he cleaned up the mess. Half an hour later, Gil and her partner arrived at the residence. As soon as they entered Min's house, Gil noticed that the room had been cleaned. She remembered Min being not particularly tidy, which aroused her suspicion. Without a word, she began to rummage through the garbage at the door, and indeed found a trophy and cloth covered in blood, which left them both stunned. Meanwhile, Father Yang had taken the body to the wilderness and dug a large hole for burial. As he was dragging the body, he heard a cough and realized that Min was still alive when he opened the bag. Father Yang smirked, thinking of a better way to use Min. He then called Park and asked if anyone else had seen her go to Min. She said only the driver knew. Father Yang then asked her to send him over to him as well. Elsewhere, Yoon saw the driver suddenly leave. Sensing that something was amiss, he decided to follow. The driver arrived at the location designated by Counselor Park and met Father Yang. But the Father Yang he met was different from usual. His eyes were cold, and a terrifying dark aura surrounded him. The driver felt a sense of dread, and then suddenly felt a tightening around his neck and lost consciousness. Yoon followed the tracks and arrived on the scene, but instead of finding the driver, he was met by Father Yang. Driven by his hatred, he charged forward with a powerful punch. Though Father Yang bled from the hit, he showed no reaction. Unconvinced, Yoon threw another punch, knocking him down and proceeded to tie him up to a tree. Just then, Gil called and told him that Counselor Park had begun her killing again. They needed to find Father Yang as soon as possible. Yoon told Gil that Father Yang was right next to him. He then turned to Father Yang and demanded to know where Min's body was. Father Yang calmly responded that a lost sheep should, of course, return home. Although Gil didn't understand what he meant, she quickly had the police trace Yoon's phone and contacted Choi to assist Yoon. Then, she and her partner rushed to Min's house. Choi was actually conflicted. He had a curse on him from an evil spirit, and if he exorcised demons again, he would face the danger of death. Moreover, if he left the punishment cell now, he could never return to the church. But if he could save Father Yang himself, he would be willing to give up everything. So he jumped out of the window of the cell, disregarding the church's orders. Choi reached the foot of the mountain and contacted Yoon. Upon hearing that Choi was coming to help, Yoon was relieved. However, Father Yang said that the time has come, using his power to push Yoon away and releasing the dark aura into the sky. Meanwhile, Gil, who had arrived at Min's house, found a disheveled Min. She was holding a metal pipe with a sinister smile, making bone-cracking noises, clearly possessed by an evil spirit. Yoon sensed someone approaching from behind. He didn't see who it was and simply asked if it was Choi. The person answered yes. However, Father Yang mockingly told Yoon that he couldn't see the truth in front of him. As Yoon was still confused about the situation, a knife was suddenly stabbed into his stomach. In front of Gil and her partner, Min thrust a knife into her right eye, blowing her head off. Yoon collapsed on the ground in pain, while the driver intended to stab him again. But Father Yang ordered him to stop, so as not to hurt Yoon any further. Upon hearing the shout, Choi quickened his pace to check the situation. He arrived at the scene only to find Yoon lying on the ground. He saw Yoon injured and wanted to take him to the hospital, but Yoon insisted that Choi chase after the possessed Father Yang first. If he escaped again, things would become troublesome. Choi understood Yoon and immediately ran in the direction Yoon had indicated, but halfway there, a figure blocked his way. Upon a closer look, it was Park's driver, who had been possessed by an evil spirit. Choi pulled out a cross, started an exorcism prayer, and slowly approached. However, the driver tilted his head and cast a curse. Choi immediately felt intense pain all over his body and knelt on the ground. He tried to control himself and get up despite the pain, but the driver gave an eerie smile, ran onto the road, and was hit by an oncoming truck, ending his life. The next day, Yoon woke up in the hospital, remembering the words Father Yang had said to him. So he called to check on his grandfather's condition, but the neighbor helping care for him asked him if he had arranged for someone to transfer his grandfather to another hospital. It was Father Yang, the head of the Sharing Hand organization. Upon hearing this, Yoon was so distressed that he nearly burst into tears. Shortly afterward, Gil asked her colleagues to help investigate. They discovered that his grandfather was taken away in an ambulance, but the driver of the ambulance had terminated himself by bulging his eyes. The whereabouts of his grandfather, the ambulance, and Father Yang were all unknown. Choi came to the hospital to visit and saw Yoon, who was seriously injured, ready to leave. He wanted to inquire about the whereabouts of his grandfather from Counselor Park. Choi told him that Gil had already tried, but Park had left the country and there was no news. This made Yoon even more anxious. He didn't understand why Father Yang would kidnap his grandfather. At a gas station on the way to Yoon's hometown, Father Yang was filling up the ambulance. He noticed that the owner of the gas station was physically and verbally abusing his employee. Father Yang watched in silence. When the employee brought him the receipt, he grabbed the employee's hand and hypnotized him. The scene switched back to Gil. After the series of events, her team leader suspended her duties. Although Gil was helpless, she realized that being a police officer wouldn't help her in this situation, so she accepted the suspension. Later, Gil went to the hospital to pick up Yoon and Choi. Yoon noticed that Gil had lost her job and was surprised, but Gil awkwardly said, "It's a good time for a break." The three were suddenly silent. They never expected that dealing with the master demon would leave them in such a terrible state. During the car ride, Yoon recalled the haunting Yuk, asking him if there were other ways to eliminate the master demon besides exorcism. Yuk was drunk at the time and blurted out that the best way to deal with the master demon, who could move freely, was to find someone with a psychic physique like Yoon and use the holy scripture to seal the demon within oneself and then kill himself. This would cause the demon to disappear forever. Before Yoon could react, his psychic power suddenly activated. He saw the scene at the gas station, the boss constantly scolding, and finally, the employee attacking the boss with a knife. Yoon recounted what he saw, and soon local police arrived at the scene. The boss was already dead. The three of them also arrived at the gas station. Suddenly, someone rushed out and blocked their car. It was the employee with a bloody face and a pierced right eye. The police discovered the suspect and moved to restrain him, but the possessed employee repelled them with a twist of his body. However, the employee didn't run. He just raised his hand, pointing in a direction, and then, using the last of his strength, he collapsed. Yoon realized that this was the direction the master demon was leading them towards. Father Yang was driving the ambulance and encountered a tour bus that had broken down on the road. He got out of his vehicle and approached the bus driver. He saw the passengers on the bus who were not only unsympathetic to the driver's hardship, but were also cursing at him to fix the bus quickly. Father Yang was filled with sadness as he walked towards the driver repairing the bus. Then, a dark shadow entered the driver's body. After Father Yang left, the bus driver had fully transformed into an evil spirit. He was filled with resentment as he walked back onto the tour bus with a huge wrench. Amid the crazy screams and wails, he sent all the passengers on a one-way trip to hell. This scene was also witnessed by Yoon, whose psychic power was activated. They then turned their car towards the crime scene. The police officers at the scene had never witnessed such brutality. Some were shocked, and others were vomiting. Suddenly, everyone noticed that the bus driver hadn't fled, but was standing in the distance. Upon seeing Yoon and the others, he pointed towards the east. Then, in front of everyone, he pierced his right eye, ending his own life. Elsewhere, Father Yang had taken the grandfather to a nursing home. He had just finished catching up with the director when an assistant came up to say that a police officer wanted to speak with the director. Father Yang's face changed at this news. The director left the room to meet the officer, who had indeed come to inquire about the wanted Father Yang. Upon realizing this, Father Yang used powerful magic to possess every single person in the nursing home with evil spirits. The police officer returned to his car with a drastic change in demeanor and began to guzzle water. The assistant was sharpening a pencil while complaining about her low salary and accidentally cut her finger. Surprisingly, she felt no pain and started manically sharpening her finger. When the director returned home, his indifference from his daughter and his wife's constant demands for money pushed him towards murderous thoughts. According to the clues, the three arrived at the director's house to seek information about Father Yang. However, the director played dumb. Just as Gil and Choi were about to leave, Yoon blocked the door, giving the two a hint. All three stormed in, overpowering the director, whose face rapidly transformed into a terrifying evil spirit. Gil then handcuffed him. Hearing the commotion, the director's wife emerged from her room, beaten and bloodied. Yoon and Choi held the director down, demanding the whereabouts of Father Yang. The director made strange noises, triggering the curse on Choi to flare up again, causing even more pain than before. Choi ran out in a panic, not wanting Yoon to discover his condition. He ran while howling in pain, finally exhausting his strength in front of a ruined building. He unbuttoned his shirt to reveal his decaying body. Desperate, Choi knelt on the ground and began to pray. He believed he was sinful and did not dare to ask God for salvation. He just hoped for a little more time to defeat the master demon. The worried Yoon followed him, and seeing Choi's decaying body reminded him of the curse he had heard about from the evil spirit. Choi finally revealed to Yoon about the curse that would kill him after 3 exorcisms. Gil was comforting the director's wife and asking her who the director had met that day that could have caused this transformation. The wife, in tears, said that only Father Yang had visited the nursing home that day. Suddenly, they heard the siren of a police car outside. Gil was about to open the door when they broke through the window and stormed in. As if things couldn't get worse, the intruder was another fully transformed officer. Gil grabbed a golf club and fought him off, but his neck snapped back into place as if nothing had happened. Gil managed to hold him off with her skinny muscles, but was eventually overpowered and choked by the evil spirit. Luckily, Yoon arrived to help, taking a hit to save Gil. Together, they managed to restrain the evil spirit. Finally, Choi came back and knocked the evil spirit unconscious with a cross, but fainted from exhaustion afterwards. Sometime later, Choi woke up in Gil's car, surprised, and asked about the situation. Yoon simply replied that they had tied them up and sent the family to a safe place. They were heading to the nursing home to confront Father Yang. Upon arriving at the nursing home, the 3 of them began to search separately. Yoon told Gil about Choi's curse. If he performed another exorcism, he might die. Gil asked how they were going to destroy the master demon. Yoon said that as long as they found Father Yang, he would handle it. He made Gil promise him that no matter what happened, she must save Choi first. But things didn't go as planned. While the 2 of them were still talking, Choi found Father Yang on the rooftop. Father Yang asked Choi why he was willing to pay such a high price for weak and foolish humans, especially since humans are full of darkness in their hearts. Choi, saddened, asked Father Yang if he had been completely possessed, and if the caring person he had seen all this time was a facade. Father Yang replied that the question was now meaningless, as the final darkness had begun. With his hands raised, unrest began to appear all over the village. Evil spirits emerging from the nursing home began to roam the streets, recklessly seeking living people or their own targets for revenge. In order to save innocent people and the Father Yang he regarded as a mentor, Choi began to pray with a determination to die, pulling out his cross and starting to recite the exorcism Bible. However, he couldn't even recite 2 lines before he was in such pain that he could barely hold on. Father Yang looked at Choi sorrowfully. Yoon and Gil also arrived at the rooftop and immediately stopped Choi from continuing to recite. Yoon said he had a way, as long as the two believed in him. Yoon asked Father Yang if he left him alive because he wanted his body. Unexpectedly, Father Yang climbed onto the parapet and shouted at them that their fate was decided 20 years ago, and tonight 2 people were supposed to die. But he had realized that now only 1 person needs to die. After that, Father Yang raised his hands and fell backward in front of the 3 of them, falling onto the sidewalk with a bang. At this moment, the possessed villagers either lost control and fainted, or regained consciousness, but couldn't remember what they were doing. The 3 ran downstairs and saw Father Yang lying in a pool of blood. Choi walked up, full of sorrow. With his last breath, Father Yang told Choi that he was free from the curse now, and then he passed away. Choi shed tears. In the end, he still couldn't save his mentor. Gil reminded Yoon to find his grandfather, while she checked on the villagers' condition, leaving Choi alone to say goodbye to Father Yang. Gil went to the place where the director's family was hiding and confirmed they were safe. Yoon found his grandfather in the nursing home and confirmed his health, which finally eased his mind. The terrifying night gave way to the sunrise, and the 3 of them were still in disbelief. All the suffering had ended in such a way. Yoon chose to stay in the village to care for his grandfather, while Gil and Choi decided to return to the city and start a new life. Before leaving, Choi asked Yoon why he had invited the Master Demon to possess him. So Yoon revealed that he had done it to die alongside the Master Demon. Choi was surprised to learn that Yoon had intended to sacrifice himself as Father Yang did. After parting ways, Yoon went to the hospital to care for his grandfather and was shocked to see signs of recovery. He quickly called for the doctor, and after an examination, his grandfather miraculously woke up, but had lost his memory due to prolonged oxygen deprivation. Upon returning to the city, Choi was summoned by the church elders. They began to believe that Father Yang had indeed been possessed by a demon and temporarily reinstated Choi. Gil, who had lost her job, returned home and sunk into a gloomy state. They had saved the villagers but couldn't bring the culprit to justice, filling Gil with guilt over her mother's death. A few days later, Yoon brought offerings to the beach and paid homage to Yuk. Talking to himself, he vowed that no matter what happens, he would find Yuk's body back. His phone suddenly rang. Choi had come to the village to check on those who had been possessed. Yoon invited him to gather at his grandfather's house after finishing his work. However, this phone call reminded Yoon of something. He suddenly remembered that Yuk might have discovered something at his grandfather's house before he was killed. Choi visited the home of a possessed police officer and asked if he felt thirsty or heard voices. The officer said he had lost his memory, but nothing else seemed different. Choi held a cross before him, asking if he felt anything. To his surprise, the officer replied that he felt nauseous. The officer's attitude took a drastic turn. He roared at Choi to leave and knocked the cross out of his hand. Realizing the situation, Choi quickly left and called Gil, who was helping clean Yoon's house. She opened the fridge and saw the hot sauce Yoon's grandfather had made for him. As she was about to take it out, her phone rang. Choi anxiously told her that the Master Demon was not eliminated, and the evil spirits were still possessing the villagers. Gil was so shocked, she dropped the hot sauce, and inside the hot sauce was a raven's head, a symbol of the Master Demon. Choi quickly went to meet Gil at Yoon's grandfather's house. At this time, Yoon returned home and started looking around. He was suddenly hit with a flashback of Yuk digging in the backyard. Like under a spell, Yoon started digging as well and quickly found a body that had been buried and sealed with a damaged right eye. On the body, there was a photo of Yoon and his grandfather from when he was a child. Yoon suddenly realized they had all been manipulated by the Master Demon. Angry, Yoon ran back to the front yard, only to see his grandfather, who had been severely injured and immobile, was sitting in the front yard gorging on lunch. Yoon moved to the side, overwhelmed, and claimed that his grandfather was actually the master demon. He wondered if the demon did transfer from him to his grandfather 20 years ago. Hearing this, his grandfather's face changed. He turned to Yoon and cast a spell, causing Yoon's right eye to be in severe pain, and he saw the truth behind everything. It turned out that after his uncle took his own life years ago, the master demon did not possess Yoon, but instead transferred to his grandfather. Using his grandfather's body, the master demon dug up his own sealed body. Yoon's mother happened to be searching for Yoon nearby, and so the master demon made her a floating corpse. While the body was transported back home for burial, Yoon's grandmother accidentally discovered this, leading the master demon to hang her to silence her. Yoon's consciousness returned to the present, entering the master demon's demonic realm. He told Yoon that for the past 20 years, he'd been enjoying his plan, with a bloodthirsty granddaughter like Counselor Park, and a compliant servant like Father Yang. But the demon did not anticipate that when he was planning to use Father Yang's hands to kill Choi and Gil, Father Yang suddenly had a change of heart and betrayed him, jumping off the building and killing himself, forcing the master demon to change his plans. Yoon didn't understand why the demon needed to possess others and kill indiscriminately. He laughed wickedly and told him that he didn't kill people randomly. It was the accumulated malice in people's hearts that the possessing evil spirits merely empowered. His real target had always been Yoon alone. He realized years ago that Yoon was a special spiritual body that only appeared once in 100 years. If he could possess Yoon, he could bring his demonic power to its limit. But Yoon's heart was without any malice, making it impossible for him to possess him. This was why he killed Yoon's father and those around him, feigned his grandfather's serious injury, and gradually caused cracks in Yoon's belief. Hearing this, Yoon charged at the master demon in anger. To his surprise, he merely stretched out his hand and pointed, causing Yoon to kneel and vomit blood from his severe injuries. The demon took out a knife, slit his grandfather's throat in front of Yoon, and told him that his grandfather's death was also his fault. Yoon could no longer hold back. He bowed his head and begged the demon to take his body instead. Hearing this, the demon roared maniacally like a goose to the sky. He had been waiting for Yoon to say this for 20 years. At this moment, Choi arrived at the grandfather's house in a taxi. When he ran to the front yard, he saw the unconscious grandfather and Yoon, who was bleeding non-stop from carvings of the Holy Scripture all over his body. Yoon told him not to come close because he had been possessed by the master demon. Seeing Yoon's state, Choi understood that Yoon wanted to die along with the master demon. Regretfully, Yoon apologized to Choi for his family's death and asked him to take care of his grandfather. With that, he aimed the knife at his throat, but his hands were already out of control. Choi tried to stop him, but was choked by Yoon, who then tried to break Choi's neck. Yoon managed to suppress the master demon with his will at that moment, used all his strength to control his body, and let go of Choi. Fearing that he would lose control at any moment, Yoon quickly ran away from the scene. As dusk fell, Yoon running on the road was spotted by the arriving Gil. Without any hesitation, Yoon walked into the sea, intending to drown himself with the demon. Gil immediately plunged into the water, mustering all her strength to drag Yoon back to the shore. However, the moment the master demon touched the water, his demonic power surged, instantly taking over Yoon's control. His body filled with power, Yoon turned to Gil, who was confused about the situation and was about to ask what was wrong. The master demon seized her hair and told her to meet her dead mother. He raised his right hand, knife in grip, ready to strike. Gil resisted with all her might, blocking the knife. Just then, Choi arrived and tackled the demon. Together they tried to restrain him, but the demon pushed them both into the sea. As they began to lose oxygen, Choi drew out a cross and stabbed the demon's hand. The pain made him release his grip. Choi seized the opportunity and used the cross to pin the demon's head, forcing him downwards. Meanwhile, Gil handcuffed the demon's hands while asking Choi what was happening. Choi explained that Yoon was possessed by the master demon and that they must expel the demon before it fully assimilates Yoon. Choi then looked up at the sky and begged for God's power. Then, Choi started chanting the exorcism scripture, but not 2 phrases in, he started bleeding from his nose. The master demon mocked him and reminded him that he would die from internal bleeding before he could expel him. Choi, undeterred, continued chanting, but by the 6th phrase, he spat out a mouthful of blood in agony. The master demon just smirked and mocked his power. Enraged, Choi pressed the cross to the demon's head, demanding his true name. Suddenly, the demon broke the handcuffs with a surge of strength, lifted Choi into the air, and said that from now on, his name was Yoon. He then aimed to finish off Choi with his knife. Gil rushed forward, grabbing the demon's hand, and yelled Yoon's name. She told him to think about his deceased family and Choi in front of him, the person he most wanted to protect. Gil's sincere words successfully brought Yoon back to his senses. Realizing he had almost killed his best friend, a heartbroken Yoon released Choi. Without hesitation, he stabbed himself in the chest. As blood poured from his mouth, he used his remaining strength to thank the two, then plunged the knife into his right eye. He turned and walked towards the sea, sinking beneath the waves. Choi, refusing to give up on Yoon, dove into the sea despite his severe injuries. Knowing he didn't have the strength to bring Yoon back, Choi tied them together with a cross bracelet, determined to stay by Yoon's side even in death. In his final moments, Yoon opened his eyes and saw Choi. He used his remaining strength to untie the bracelet and pushed Choi away, sinking into the sea. Choi was saved by Gil and brought back to the shore. Upon waking and not seeing Yoon, he rushed back into the water, frantically shouting Yoon's name. However, they could no longer see any trace of Yoon. As the sun rose, the two sat on the shore waiting for news from the search and rescue team. Despite searching all night, they found no trace of Yoon's body. Instead, they discovered a single shoe belonging to Yoon and Yuk. This prompted Gil to lament that even if he was gone, he still intended to bring Yuk back. Amidst their grief, the Master Demon incident was declared over. A year later, Councillor Park officially became the Chief of Parliament. From then on, she could act as she pleased without any constraints. Meanwhile, Choi and Gil returned to their normal lives. One day, they agreed to visit Yoon's grandfather's house to pay respects to Yoon. Looking at Yoon's photo, both were still unable to accept the reality. However, just as they finished paying their respects and were preparing to leave, the neighbor informed them that there was no need to continue sending money for the grandfather. Someone unknown was sending daily living supplies and money. This revelation piqued the two's curiosity, so they decided to find out who was helping the grandfather in secret. Following leads, they arrived at a small seaside cottage. But when they saw the individual emerging from the house, tears welled up in their eyes. Standing before them was none other than Yoon, alive and well. Albeit missing his right eye, he was adorned with a cross necklace and a bracelet on his wrist. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.